Technology and education have become so intertwined that one is scarcely able to think of one without the other. In fact, technology standards have been incorporated into teacher accreditation, and technology use is expected at all levels in every classroom, traditional or online. This review will provide some historical perspective and provide us with some ethical questions to consider as we move forward toward the inevitable growth and expansion of technology and education. I'm Jane Honeycutt, and this is Friday's edition of Technology Review. In a 1998 article entitled Digital Diploma Mills, the Automation of Higher Education, David Noble has some some criticism of online education, which I think is worthy of our attention. He gives us some history of all of this and argues that university administrators partnered with commercial vendors are in opposition to those who really constitute the core of education, and that is students and teachers. He discusses the classroom versus the boardroom in terms of the perspective on education. He claims that the high-tech transformation of higher education was really initiated and implemented from the top down. It was not a response to demand on the part of students or demand on the part of faculty. It was something that the administration saw as an opportunity to grow its student population without having to invest in capital construction projects, and so they would get more tuition without having to build more buildings. This was done without a student and faculty involvement in the decision making. Sometimes it was done despite negative feedback from faculty. I know at Northeast State this began in 2000, and it was a top-down initiative. It wasn't anything that the faculty or the students were calling out for. At UCLA, the administration launched their initiative during the summer when most of the faculty was away, and thus there was little possibility for their oversight or governance. David Noble worries about the commercialization of education, and I think this is something for us to think about, to ask ourselves, what is driving the rush to implement new technology? Are we really considering the pedagogical cost of offering courses in a distance environment? When we have ITV courses so that I can reach 3 different locations, but what is the cost in terms of the learning environment? What are the economic costs of setting up such a system? Is this about progress? We often fear getting left behind. We want to be seen as a progressive institution. Noble, though, says that beneath the technological transformation of education that we've all been cheering about, that we've all been encouraged to embrace, that we all now believe that we must master in order to be effective educators, he says underneath that really is the commercialization of higher education, taking higher education institutions and creating a huge market inside of them for gadgets. He looks at the first phase as beginning in the 1970s, when there was a movement away from heavy industry and toward knowledge-based industries like space, electronics, computers, materials, telecommunications, and bioengineering. He talks about how we have come to think of education as the development of intellectual capital. So it becomes like how much are we worth, like money. So that turns the attention of our universities as intricately related to the economic machinery. So we are producing an educated workforce for the companies that need those workers. So we have industrial partnerships. There's a proliferation of industrial partnerships and a new proprietary arrangement. I know that here at Northeast State we've spent many years developing relationships with industries in the region so that we have programs specifically designed for their needs in their companies. For the four-year universities, you see the combined effort to partner with industry. And one of the things that happened was the relaxation of antitrust regulations, greater tax incentives for corporate funding of university research. So obviously there you have a real close relationship between the corporation and the university. And then there's the 1980 reform of the patent law, which gave universities for the first time automatic ownership of patents that came out of federal government grants, federal government research grants. So the university becomes more like a company, a patent holding company. So they codify intellectual property, develop infrastructure for the conduct of commercially viable research, cultivate corporate ties, create mechanisms for marketing their new commodities, and give exclusive licenses to their patents. So this changes very much the nature of what a university once was. What is the result for the student? There's initially the wholesale reallocation of university resources toward research function at the expense of educational function. So we're paying our faculty to do research. We are hiring researchers into our universities at the expense of educating the students that come there. What happens? We all know this: enormous class sizes, a reduction of teaching staff and instructional resources, salaries are frozen, curricular offerings are cut to the bone, and tuition soars in order to maintain the commercial infrastructure and to, of course, pay for the bloated administration that results. In the end, students pay more and get less. Noble moves on to discuss phase 2 of this process, which is computer-based instruction. He says that the champions of computer-based instruction focus their attention on increasing efficiencies of already overextended teachers, ignoring the possibility that these high-tech remedies actually make the problem worse and increase rather than reduce the cost of higher education. How can this be? How are costs increased when we use technology? This places a limitless of demand upon instructor time, which we can all attest to. The vastly expanded overhead requirements of equipment, upgrades, maintenance, technical and administrative support staff, that creates the need for outside funding and then student technology fees. It would be interesting to consider the ethical implications of charging students a technology access fee for a technology that is not necessarily directly related to their success as students. Who are the beneficiaries of the transformation? We are told that the students' educational experience is going to be transformed and they're going to be more successful. Noble says that this is not improving education because it's not about education. It's just the name of the market. Vendors are the beneficiaries from his view. Apple, IBM, Bell, the cable companies, Microsoft, publishing companies like Simon & Schuster, Prentice Hall, who give us online versions of their materials. Education is a market for their wares, a market worth several $100 billion. Education industry is an investment opportunity. Lehman Brothers sees this. They say it's a lucrative investment for the future and it will replace the healthcare industry. What is our rationale, though? We say it's access. Okay, the stated rationale on anybody's mission statement is that this extends educational access to those unable to get to the campus, people who are employed full-time, people who can't afford or don't have a car. But what David Noble says is the real rationale is that the campus has become a consumer for these products. Students outnumber their distance learning counterparts 6 to 1, but we're investing a tremendous amount of money in this. And that 6 to 1 ratio is precisely what it is here at Northeast State. Of the 6,000 students we have, only a little over 1,000 are involved in any sort of distance learning, where there has been a lot of money invested. He also points the finger at techno-zealots, as he calls them. These are the people who think that computers are going to be the answer to everything, and he says it's simply because they like to play with them. Where is, though, the evidence of improved learning outcomes? All the standards we studied said that we had to have evidence to say that that technology has resulted in improved learning outcomes. Noble says that we have forged ahead with that without any real tangible support for the claim that this enhances learning outcomes. And I think that's an important thing for us to stop and consider. We looked at all the standards and we know that there's supposed to be evidence, and then when you look at the evidence, what is there? I can think of our own evidence. I'm not so sure that we have any studies that show, okay, these people over here who have had technology in the classroom did better than these people over here who have not. Now, that research may be out there and I'm unaware of it, but that would be something to really look into before making big decisions about technology. This leads nicely into the second story about technology in secondary schools. iPads for everyone is the slogan in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Unified School District has decided to put iPads in all its students' hands. According to the Associated Press, the Los Angeles Unified School District developed a plan to put an iPad in the hands of each of their 650,000 students at a cost of $1 billion. But an embarrassing glitch occurred when the first round of tablets went out. Instead of solving math problems or doing their homework, more than 300 of the students quickly cracked the security settings and started tweeting, posting to Facebook, and playing video games. Both the critics and the supporters said that the school districts were hasty, overreaching in their attempt to distribute an iPad to everybody, and so that inevitably problems resulted. Obviously, and we've talked about this before, planning. It doesn't seem like there was very much planning that went into the strategy. That's where the debacle began. As with anything that any of us have experienced, it has to be well thought out and well planned before it's going to work. Students should have been trained about what was and was not appropriate use of this new technology. And of course, a firewall needed to be used that could not have been so easily broken into. The students, we all know, are very, very savvy with computers, much more so than we are. The students, of course, agreed it was so easy. They should have known this was going to happen. And of course, we're all high school students after all. Come on. Ultimately, they had to confiscate all the devices and put a freeze on using them off campus, which defeats the entire purpose of having them in the first place. Of course, the move was touted as a means of leveling the academic playing field in a public school system where 80% of the families come from low incomes. So the intentions are good, and giving equal access to cutting-edge technology sounds really good. But what evidence is there that an iPad helps with English or an iPad helps with math? And who pays if a student drops and breaks this gadget? How can this help if the student is not allowed to connect to the internet from home for security reasons? And the tablet itself is no good without good software on it, and how much good software is on it? At this point, no program adequately supports English as a second language students in a district where 73% of students are Hispanic. Is there any evidence that the iPad enhances instruction, or is this a commercial venture that mostly benefits Apple, which has found a tremendous market for its product? I'm sure David Noble would say the latter. Now our last story from the professional world. A hospital worker in Mississippi was terminated after responding to a tweet from Governor Haley Barbour. The governor of Mississippi, Haley Barbour, had used Twitter to talk about his state's dire fiscal situation and asked for feedback from the public on ways to cut costs. One of the returned tweets was, schedule regular medical exams like everyone else instead of paying UMC employees overtime to do it when clinics are usually closed. The management of the hospital was displeased because the employee actually violated HIPAA and internal policies by revealing that the governor had been a patient. The employee, of course, was fired. This tells us the obvious: think before using social media. The employee may have never even considered that her use of social media might be a violation. She may have thought, as many of us do, what I do on my Twitter is none of your business. But business leaders say they have a right to know how employees are portraying their companies online. If an employee makes defamatory statements on a social media site, it is possible that his employer could be held liable for those statements if the employee was acting within the scope of his employment, and that certainly was the case with the hospital worker in Mississippi. The hospital could have been sued for a HIPAA violation. We think we have free speech, but that doesn't always apply in the context of the employer-employee relationship in the private sector. Neither does it apply in the public sector. We're not protected by that all the time. So as we think about these issues, I think the important thing that comes out of it is when we make decisions, whether it is to respond to somebody's Twitter, respond to an email, or make decisions about spending a lot of money on technology for the classroom, the intentions may be good, but we really, really need to do the research, figure out what we want to accomplish, find out whether this has been done before and whether it is actually going to accomplish what you say or set out for it to accomplish. Good evening, and thank you for your time.